retorted quickly, and Dirk threw down the rag he'd been using on the fire engine running board. Until you came down, yeah. Dirk huffed barely above his breath. I can't believe you brought up that idea. What? No one came up with anything else. And in case you didn't notice, most people liked it. You told me the other night you were afraid no one would like it, but that was bullshit, and I bought it. Lee stepped closer, clenching his teeth. You're angry because my idea was good and everyone liked it. Don't be ridiculous, Dirk said. I'm glad they liked your idea. Then what's your problem? Lee asked, so confused his head spun. Everything worked out. They liked the idea, and it may bring in a lot of money for the station. I don't understand why you're angry. Because I asked you not to bring that up, and you did anyway, Dirk growled. I thought we'd agreed, and you did what you wanted anyway. Dirk's tone softened slightly. So that's it. You're pissed off because you don't like the idea, and I shouldn't do what you don't like? Well, screw you, Dirk, Lee hissed between his teeth as he heard others moving around. You don't get to control my life. Lee turned to walk away, but stopped and faced Dirk once again. You know, instead of being a dick, you should be supportive and helpful, if not for me, then for the station and the team. Lee walked away, his heart racing and his spirit flagging. He climbed the stairs, grabbed his list off the table, and stopped by the captain's office before leaving the station. Most everyone was talking about the dinner, and they said goodbye, offering help of any kind. As he passed Dirk, all he got was a scowl, and Lee shook his head as he walked away, heading for his car. He climbed inside and started the engine before pounding the wheel with his fist. You're such an asshole! Dirk Krause could be the most exasperating man on the face of the earth. Fuck you! A stream of expletives followed, and once he'd let it out, Lee drove home, but his insides kept roiling. Lee spent the night alone that night, and for the next week. He'd been busy both at work and making plans for the dinner. Though he hadn't been avoiding Dirk, he had to admit he wasn't searching him out either. Lee was definitely still angry with him, and he was determined that he wasn't going to be the one to come forward, not this time. He was right, he knew he was, and Dirk had to learn he needed to treat him as an equal and not like someone he could push around. Lee broke the pencil in his hand, just thinking about it. Hey, Vivian, another of the women in the company, said from across the table. What did that ever do to you? Lee took a deep breath and dropped the pieces of pencil. Trouble in paradise? That made Lee scoff. Being with Dirk has never been what you would call paradise, Lee lamented. But it had been good most of the time, and damn it, he missed him. I can bet, but I'd also guess it was probably intense, and in his own way, he told you how he felt. Vivian didn't appear to be guessing. He never talked to me about much, but I've known guys like him. They're hard as hell on the people who care for them. Vivian peered over his arm to look at what he'd been doing. How's the dinner coming? She asked, and Lee was grateful she changed the subject. Lee had spent enough time thinking about Dirk, and he really wasn't interested in talking about it. I have the hall. A friend of mine is on the board at the Expo Center, and they had the Saturday we were interested in open. The place is clean and relatively new. There isn't much as far as decoration, but there's a huge set of doors, and I thought we could probably drive the antique engine inside. It'll actually fit in the building and make a great backdrop for the stage area. Cap also said we could use some of the antique hand pumps and fire extinguishers as well. There's a lot of space, and I don't want the room to seem empty. Lee showed her his drawing for how everything would go. How many people are you planning on? Vivian asked, and Lee shrugged. Not sure. I can seat up to 1,500 without the trucks and about 1,200 with them, but I can't plan the room configuration until we have an idea of the number of people to expect. Lee looked to Vivian, who smiled at him. If he were into girls, she would definitely be the one. Vivian was an eye-catcher, there was no doubt about it, and Lee knew half the men in the station would give anything to have her looking at them with those huge blue eyes of hers. She was also smart and tough. I have the tickets being printed, and they'll go on sale just as soon as I can pick them up from the printers. You don't think $20 is too much? Lee asked. When they'd settled on the price, Lee had thought it was too expensive, but he'd been overruled. It's fine. Remember, it's a fundraiser, and everyone will know that. I also have a surprise for you. I dropped the poster off to be printed. Vivian handed him a rolled-up piece of paper. This is the sample. Her eyes danced with mischief, and Lee wondered what she'd done as he unrolled the sheet. Jesus, Lee gasped. Where did you get that picture? He was looking at a picture of himself from the waist up, bare-chested, wearing only his fire hat. He wasn't sure how he felt about being plastered all over town, but how could he complain? He'd been the one to dream up this shindig. I gave it to her. Lee turned around and saw Dirk standing behind him. Vivian stood up and walked away, giving Lee a quick smile before leaving the room. She came to my house a few days ago and read me the riot act. Dirk sat next to him at the table. She walked in and instead of saying hello, slapped me on the side of the head. When I asked her why, she told me that on the farm where she grew up, the first thing you learned was when you wanted to get the attention of a jackass, you kicked him. I could kick you, but I figured a good slap upside the head would work, was what she said. Lee began to laugh. He could so see Vivian doing that. What else did she say? That you were working your butt off for the good of the station, and if I was any kind of boyfriend, I'd be here helping you instead of letting my pride get the better of me, Dirk answered. Only she wasn't that nice when she said it, and there was at least one threat to my manhood involved. Dirk shivered a little, and Lee wondered exactly what Vivian had told him. Suffice it to say, she told me to pull my head out of my ass and get down here to help you. Then she asked for the picture. When did you take it? Lee asked, because he couldn't remember posing for a picture like that. I took it in July when you were coming over to see me. You came right from work, and it was so hot you'd taken off your shirt, but left your hat on because of the sun. Dirk scooted closer. You looked drop-dead sexy like that, and I had to get a picture. Dirk bumped his shoulder. I should have been more supportive, Dirk admitted before looking at the drawing of the hall. So what do you still need? What don't I? The venue has tables and even chairs, but we need dishes and cutlery, tablecloths and napkins. I also need to find a photographer. Lee was beginning to wonder if he could pull this off. I found some places that rent stuff, but they want a lot of money. I'm trying to keep the budget tight so we can make as much money as possible. Lee looked at his list and was about to make another round of phone calls. Are you still on duty? Dirk asked, and Lee shook his head. Then let's go. I know someone who might be able to help. Dirk motioned toward the door, and Lee picked up his pad, following Dirk down the stairs to his car. They drove downtown and pulled up in front of Café Belgie. Lee had been there a few times, but never with Dirk. What are we doing here? I met Daryl and Billy a few weeks ago when they had a bit of a kitchen fire. Nothing too bad, thankfully, but they probably have contacts that may be able to help us. Dirk finished parking the car, and they got out and walked into the restaurant. There were a few customers at tables, but the dining room was largely empty. Lee supposed that was normal for the middle of the day. Is Billy or Daryl here? Dirk asked a server as he came out of the kitchen. Billy will be right out, he said, and stood for a second watching them. Lee nearly smiled when he realized they were being checked out by the waiter. The kitchen door opened, and Lee saw a man about their age, maybe a little younger, come out. Can I help you? Hi, Billy, I'm Dirk Kraus. I was one of the firefighters who was here a few weeks ago. Dirk smiled. Is there a problem? Billy asked, looking around, and Lee swore he heard him sniffing. No, but we need some help, Dirk said, and Billy motioned them to a table. Would you like some coffee? Billy asked, and before they could answer, he was already retrieving a pot and some cups. He poured them each a cup and then sat down at the table. What can we do for you? Dirk looked at him, and Lee nodded and began. We need to raise some money because the borough is thinking of closing our fire station. We're planning a fundraiser and we need things like tablecloths, dishes, and cutlery. We looked into renting them, but they want a fortune, and we'd just be spending all the money we're hoping to bring in. Sometimes, things seem to conspire against his best intentions, and this was one of them. Dirk said you might be able to help. Lee looked around the restaurant and wondered what they could do. They obviously didn't have the dishes and supplies for over 1,000 people. What sort of dinner are you doing? Billy asked, and Lee explained what they were serving and the concept for the evening. Okay, Billy explained. First thing, when you have tickets, we'll take 10, because I'm not missing this for the world. Billy's eyes danced and he grinned. You two running around in your boots and fire pants? There's no way I'm missing that. Missing what? A man in a chef coat asked as he approached the table. Billy explained about the dinner, talking so fast Lee could barely understand him. I said we'd take 10 tickets. I figured we could get the guys to go along. Billy turned back to them, and Lee saw the chef smile indulgently at Billy. Sorry, this is my partner Daryl. He's the chef here. Billy went on to explain what they needed. If you want my advice, I suggest paper plates unless you want to do dishes for days. They make disposable plates with a plastic coating so they feel heavier, more like real plates, but you don't have to wash them, and they'll be cheaper than renting everything. I suggest the same for the utensils. Use disposable, but rent real glasses, especially if you're planning to have a bar of any type. Don't know if we can, Lee said, and Daryl nodded as he sat down next to Billy. The liquor laws here, Daryl shook his head, are antiquated at best. Let me do some checking with a friend of a liquor control board. They may have a temporary license provision for civic groups. I'll also give you the name of our restaurant supplier. He should be able to get you what you need at a pretty good price. Daryl leaned back in his chair. Peter, it's Billy. He was already talking on the phone. Some of the firemen are doing a benefit, and I think they need your help. Could you meet with them? Billy listened for a minute. Does tomorrow work? Billy asked Lee, and he nodded. About 3? Barring a fire, Lee answered. 3 it is, at the Union Fire Station on Luther, Billy told Peter. They're looking at the good disposables you have, so you might bring samples. They're looking at about 1,200 people. Billy listened for a few seconds. Good, thanks. We'll see you soon. Billy laughed lightly. Don't worry, I already reserved tickets. Billy listened for a few more seconds and then hung up. He'll be at the station tomorrow at 3, and he thinks he has things that'll work. Thank you, Lee said as some of what had been threatening to overwhelm him slipped away. There were so many details he was trying to nail down, including decorations, and trying to figure out how much to order of anything was a constant headache. Looming over everything was the thought, what if everyone did all this work and no one came? That alone was enough to make his stomach do flip-flops.